Children are naturally innocent and pure, so the thought of them committing terrible acts or crimes seems unimaginable. Yet, believe it or not, there have been numerous cases where minors committed such shocking crimes that they were tried and convicted as adults. These young offenders, whose actions would send chills down anyone's spine, found it impossible to conceal their emotions when faced with harsh sentences. Some broke down in tears, others expressed regret, and a few even lashed out at the judges, but all ultimately faced the consequences of their actions. Number 1. T.J. Lane. T.J. Lane, a 17-year-old former student of Chardon High School, carried out a tragic attack on February 27th, taking the lives of 3 students and injuring 3 others. Witnesses reported that Lane had a personal conflict with one of his victims, whom he had ridden the same school bus with. Armed with a .22 caliber pistol, Lane's actions resulted in 2 of the injured students being hospitalized, with one suffering permanent paralysis. Lane was charged with 6 counts, but since he was a minor at the time of the crime, authorities had to decide whether to try him as an adult or juvenile. Among his victims were Danny Parmenter Jr. and Demetrius Hewlin. Throughout the proceedings, Lane displayed a lack of remorse. He arrived in court wearing a buttoned-up blue shirt, which he later unbuttoned to reveal a white t-shirt with the word "Killer" emblazoned on it. Given a chance to speak, Lane escalated tensions by making hateful remarks to the victims' families and even laughed during a mother's statement. Lane ultimately pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Number 2. Jessica Careline. 17-year-old Jessica was involved in a tragic accident that claimed the lives of 2 people. On September 2014, while driving east on 2nd Street near the Wyoming Medical Center, her car veered off course, crashing into a sign and then the building itself. The victims, Brandon Every and Amanda Strickland, both 27, died from their injuries. Jessica, who was also injured but survived, faced significant consequences for her actions. During the investigation, authorities discovered a can of air duster in Jessica's car, which she admitted to using before the crash. It was revealed that she was driving at 76 miles per hour, and none of the occupants were wearing seat belts. Jessica pleaded guilty to 2 counts of vehicular homicide. In court, Jessica showed profound remorse, with tears streaming down her face as she addressed the court. Judge Brian Barker sentenced her to a prison term of 12 to 16 years, reflecting the gravity of her actions and the deep impact on the victims' families. Number 3. Roxana Sikorski. In 2014, 15-year-old Roxana from Playmore pleaded guilty to conspiring to murder her adoptive parents and younger brother. She had plotted with her 23-year-old boyfriend, Michael Rivera, and was charged as an adult. Roxana's parents argued she was influenced by Rivera and suffering from mental illness. Roxana, once seen as the ideal child, began to show troubling behavior in her adolescence. Diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder, she was put on medication, yet her downward spiral continued. After meeting Rivera on Facebook, her behavior worsened, leading to secret meetings and a brief runaway attempt. Her distress intensified after her parents charged Rivera with assault, prompting her to plan a tragic attack. On October 17th, following Rivera's instructions, Roxana attacked her 12-year-old brother Lucas and attempted to harm her sister before fleeing. Arrested at Rivera's home, she expressed remorse and a desire to marry him. Despite her tearful apologies and visible regret during sentencing, the judge sentenced her to 20 years in prison for her actions. Number 4. Starling Stone. Starling Stone was a reclusive teenager, spent his days immersed in violent computer games and inappropriate websites, concealing a dark ambition: to become a notorious serial killer. At 19, he abandoned both his family and his budding accounting career to delve deeper into this fantasy, ultimately deciding to murder Sharon Moss. Decades later, Stone revealed to psychiatrists that his decision was inspired by a documentary on Richard Ramirez, the infamous Los Angeles serial killer. Stone confessed that, while attacking Mrs. Moss, he felt no more emotion than he would while battling a virtual enemy in one of his games. Judge Brian Barker sentenced Stone to a minimum of 20 years in prison, condemning his actions as both heinous and meaningless, reflecting the deep disconnect Stone had from the gravity of his crimes. Number 5. Alex King. On November 26, 2021, 12-year-old Alex King and his brother Derek ended the life of their father, Terry King, by striking him with a baseball bat and then setting their family home on fire in Man, Florida. Terry, who was 40 years old at the time, was the victim of what the boys claimed was an attempt to escape the mental abuse they had endured from him, including being stared at and whipped. A family friend, Ricky Chavez, was also involved as an accomplice for hiding the boys in his RV. The prosecution charged Chavez and the brothers with the same crime, but while Chavez was acquitted, the King brothers were convicted. Derek was sentenced to 8 years in prison, and Alex received a 7-year sentence. Alex was released in 2002 at the age of 18 after serving 6 years, while Derek was released in March 2009 at the age of 20. Throughout their sentencing, the boys remained still and expressionless, with their heads bowed. Number 6. Philip Chism. At just 14 years old, Philippe committed horrific crimes that led to a life sentence. He assaulted and then took the life of his mathematics teacher, Cullen Richter, who taught at Danvers High School. Judge David Louis of the Salem Superior Court condemned the crime as brutal and senseless, noting that Cullen had lived a life of silence and heroism, and that the impact of the tragedy would never fade. Philippe's attorney argued that he suffered from a mental illness, but the jury rejected this claim. Philippe was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years, along with an additional 40 concurrent years for charges of abuse and theft. During the sentencing, Philippe's mother remained silent but apologized to the Richter family for her son's actions. Philippe stood before the judge with a poker face, showing no emotion or remorse for his crimes. Number 7. Demond Camp. Demond, a 19-year-old from Florida, was accused of murdering his 2 roommates. During his court appearance, he arrived in a wheelchair, grimacing and shouting as if in severe pain. However, the judge saw through this act and denied him bail. Previously, Demond had confessed to a police officer investigating a break-in at Jake Park, admitting to killing his friend. When police investigated his address, they found a bullet hole in the door, a shell casing on a nearby staircase, and the bodies of his 19-year-old roommates, Janagram and Jordan. The weapon used in the crime was discovered about 15 meters from where the bodies were found. Demond's erratic behavior continued in court, where he shouted, "God," as he was wheeled in. Although his actions initially suggested mental illness, it was later revealed that he was actually intoxicated at the time. Number 8. Dylan Schumacher. In 2013, a teenager from Spring was convicted of taking the life of his girlfriend's young son. At just 17 years old, Dylan was sentenced to 25 years in prison for murdering 23-month-old Austin Smith. Dylan was babysitting Austin and his younger brother while his girlfriend was at work. According to the prosecutor, he smothered the child's face with a pillow and struck him because he wouldn't stop crying. 13 witnesses described Dylan Schumacher as manipulative and deceitful before his conviction. Despite his tears in court, which were seen as a staged attempt to persuade the judge for leniency, the court and public remained unconvinced. Everyone agreed that Dylan received the sentence he deserved. Although he begged for mercy, he showed none towards the defenseless child whose life he had cruelly taken. Number 9. Morgan and Anisa. 2 12-year-old girls, Morgan and Anisa, were arrested for attempting to kill their friend, Peyton Liner, to honor the fictional online character Slender Man. Living in Wisconsin, the girls lured Peyton into a forest and stabbed her 19 times. Fortunately, Peyton managed to crawl to a road, where she was found and taken to the hospital, surviving the brutal attack. Although both girls were found not guilty by reason of mental illness, they were committed to mental health institutions. Morgan was sentenced to 25 years to life, and Anisa received a 40-year-to-life sentence, with both remaining under observation until the age of 37. During sentencing, they appeared disheveled and remorseful. Morgan, in particular, was tearful and apologized to Peyton and her family. Number 10. Antonio Barbo. Antonio Barbo and his friend Nathan Pahape, both just 13, committed a shocking crime in September 2012 in Chimboyd, Wisconsin. They planned to rob Barbo's great-grandmother, 78-year-old Barbara Olson. Breaking into her home, they attacked her with an axe and left her to die, stealing money and other items before fleeing. Arrested and charged with first-degree intentional homicide, Barbo was sentenced in 2013 to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years, while Nathan received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Both were tried as adults due to the severity of their crime. In court, Olson's family expressed their deep pain and loss, while Barbo's family apologized for his actions. Antonio, now 14, was visibly emotional, crying as he faced the reality of his life sentence. His reaction highlighted the devastating consequences of his actions and the severity of his punishment.